Welcome to Diversity Conversations, where we engage in thought-provoking dialogue to identify leadership solutions to today's most challenging conflicts. Stream live each week, Saturday 9:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. Hosted by Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategist and CEOs Eric Ellis and Tommy Lewis. Join us and add your voice to this engaging diversity conversation.
Good morning, Greater Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky, the United States, and the world. My name is Eric Ellis. I'm the president and CEO of Integrity Development Corporation, and I'm joined this morning by my good friend and brother,
Tommy Lewis, president and CEO of Make It Plain Consulting. Good morning, Eric.
Tommy Lewis, and you not in the airport.
Not in the airport. I'm not in transition. I'm not in and out. I'm sitting down, present, and excited for the conversation.
Man, I know the community is so glad. Ty, I'm so glad you've tuned in this morning from Atlanta, man. We're glad to have you join us this morning. And Tommy, man, I missed you, man. Because we were trying to make it work last week. I know it was not the greatest day for me either, man. So when you sort of phased out like an old Star Trek movie, that is just phased out, I had to go and phase myself out. Sometimes you just don't have all the energy, man. And we are so grateful for this opportunity that we have to talk with our community. We're going to let you know that during the months of July and August, Tommy and I be taking a break, but we'll have a lot of our shows that we'll be replaying, and then we'll join you again in September. Tommy, how was your week, man?
Eric, the week was fantastic. And before I start on my week real quick, I want to give a shout out to our producer, Brooke. For those who don't know, she is very well versed, very skilled at what she does. And to be frank, she keeps Eric and I on task.
Woo,
we have a 9:30 Eastern start. We have our intro. We get in there and we get a little chatty. Just catching up. And she does a phenomenal job of not only contributing her thoughts, her experiences, but keeping us to task with producing this show. So if we have an opportunity, community, give a shout out to Brooke, our producer. She deserves it. She's behind the scenes, but a valuable piece of this production and our success.
I'm glad you said that. Brooke, why don't you come on stage so that people can see who you are? And then I'm going to say that, if not today, there she is. Brooke's in
Thank you, Tommy. Thank you very much. I appreciate those sweet words. I really appreciate it. And I'm grateful to be here. I love your all's work and getting to know you all and listening to backstage and all of that stuff. So thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Brooke. And we'll make sure that in the future that Brooke makes her information available as well, because she's helped to start up some other podcasts. And so for those of you that are thinking about doing something in this space, Brooke is a person you can reach out to me or Tommy, or she'll make her information available as well. We like keeping her busy. And so that's awesome. Tommy, talk about your week, and then I'm going to share some things about mine. Then we got a wonderful guest that's going to join us today.
Had a fairly busy week this week, Eric. We are getting calls after calls, mostly through referrals, to do work with God's blessings across the country. And so we're getting these calls. We're having to conduct kind of go through the interview process, which I'm okay with. We love doing what we do. So we have a couple of clients. I would like to say several, maybe 7 in total, new clients that are coming on board. We're still going through the process of, being introduced to board of trustees, executive teams, HR folks, and organizational development folks, the folks who are on the ground deploying the training. We are going to be a seamless partner to all of their work. And so the benefit of that, Eric, from our perspective, and this is how the week has been, Make It Plain Consulting, we don't always have to be on the front lines. Right. We can simply complement, and that's what we've been doing. We've been complementing the already existing training and development function, and we've broadened their menu of offerings. So we've added some 30, in some cases, maybe 40 different training solutions to a company that may have 20. And it also builds their capacity. And we come in wanting to hit the ball out of the park, and we have been. So we make everyone look good.
Right.
Everyone look good, from the CEO to the individual contributor.
Right.
And that's how the week has been, trying to help people and organizations look good, to move the needle in this work.
That's
And then finally, Eric, once again, as I always talk about or try to, I've been trying to take my vacations.
Okay, come on now. Right, get it in there.
Get it in there. Last week, again, I was traveling on business, and it's always, plane, train, automobile, hotel, same thing. And so when I come back, I get right back into the grind, and sometimes I don't have time or take time to get a little mini vacation. So that's what we do. Tomorrow, Sunday, here in Southwest Ohio, we have an amusement park called Kings Island. Wife and I will run up to Kings Island, spend about 3 or 4 hours up there, and that's our mini vacation.
Right, just being a kid again.
And that's what we do. That's how the week has been. And glad to be with us again this afternoon.
Tommy, I love that. That's put a thought in my mind as well. The other thought I had in my mind, Tommy, is if we can figure it out, we ought to do one of the shows from a golf course.
Yes,
just
sir.
going around the golf, man, that you and I are playing. We had to work it out with the camera, but I think that would be so enjoyable for people to see us having fun out there. For us to again talk about, because I've had some comments back from people that saw our show on the life lessons of golf. Some people have never been on a golf course, man. So maybe they can join us as we have fun. Because we can do anything, can't we, Tom?
We sure can.
Whatever we want. This is our show.
Eric, that's a fantastic
idea. Right. But we just want to make sure it's somebody other than us with the camera, so we're not just bobbling everybody all around, But yeah, I like that. We'll talk further about that. My week, Tommy, was a hectic, enjoyable, exciting week. I had read an article that is called "Denial of Structural Racism Linked to Anti-Black Prejudice," and I found this so fascinating. In this article, it was the research was done by the American Psychological Association. It was a meta study of 83 studies around structural racism. And what they discovered is that people who deny the existence of structural racism are more likely to exhibit anti-Black prejudice and less likely to show racial empathy or openness to diversity. And I'll tell you, Tommy, they said that they looked at people who denied structural racism versus people who say that they're colorblind. And they found a difference. They found that the people who deny structural racism are the bigger problem, that they didn't find the same problems with people who just deny, say, I'm colorblind. Those folks were not more likely to exhibit anti-Black prejudice. They were not less likely to show racial empathy or openness to diversity. So that was interesting. So I sent that article to one of my CEOs, man, and he leaned into that. And I told him, I don't think the rest of the executives are ready to receive this kind of article, but I thought you ought to see it. And we actually looked at him. He was more of from the colorblind community, and that left him still open to not oppose diversity and still want to do the right things, which was interesting. I am preparing for speaking at SHRM's annual conference next week. So Judy and I, my wife and I, leave out tomorrow. We're both speaking at the annual conference. Tommy, I still got to get you, on that trail, because I think that they would love and benefit from you being one of the speakers there. I am also preparing to my speech for the HR leaders and DEI leaders for the NBA. So I'm excited about that. And I'm finishing up a search process with one of my clients. And so this week we had a day set aside that we interviewed the candidates and the talent team from the company that we're working with, that we had trained them on unconscious bias and everything like that. They're doing these interviews. And so after one particular interview, one of the talent team members didn't speak. I mean, he had a sort of an expression on his face, right after the interview, but then he didn't say anything. And somebody said, can you explain why you didn't say anything? We saw that expression on your face. He said, I'm not speaking because I'm trying to manage my bias. Wow. And I thought that was beautiful, man.
Yeah.
That he said, hey, look, you've made us aware And so I had a reaction. I know it was linked to bias. And so I don't think that I should be saying anything right now.
Wow.
Right. I thought it was powerful, man. And I said,
I thought it was powerful.
yeah. And I said, well, the fact that you shared that, I said, now other people can talk about what now we can look at. Is that a bias, or is that something that's really linked to something that is important for us to be aware of and have a conversation about?
Yeah.
So it was really interesting how we were able to then have a conversation about what he described as a bias, which actually, in fact, is linked to one of the competencies and trait areas that we're interested in for this particular position.
Yeah.
But just as powerful when you get people that are trying to live out this work that you and I are teaching.
Absolutely. Powerful week, Eric. And I want to follow up on that article again. I think it's research is great. Facts, data are great while tied into a narrative.
Right.
A story.
Right. 83 studies. This thing was powerful. Let's see. Denial of structural racism is more likely to be linked to anti-Black prejudice than, people who deny structural racism were more likely to endorse strong beliefs. Oh, this is the other interesting part. I did take this note. People who denied structural racism were also more likely to endorse stronger beliefs that societal inequity is acceptable and reported fewer intentions to engage in social justice behaviors. Now, this is such an important article because of what's happening around the country, where in state houses all across the country, they're trying to eliminate anything from the curriculum that speaks about systemic and structural racism as a part of our. This has got the answer right here. And it really lines up with what we intuitively were thinking, but now that's backed. American Psychological Association.
Yep.
A combination of 83 valid studies around this. So interesting, we'll continue. Today we've got as our guest, Dr. Gary Agee. And so if we'll just bring Dr. Gary to the stage. Gary, how are you, man?
Hey, man, after a few technical glitches, I am here in my daughter's studio. How's that?
Excellent, man. You are here. We're so glad to have you with us. Gary is a great friend. He's done work with both Tommy and myself in this space. And Gary, I want our audience, I think we've spoken before on the show, but I'd like you to sort of just go and introduce yourself to our audience. Tell them who you are, how you grew up, just anything that sort of led to making you who you are today. I think it's helpful for people to know who you are.
Well, how much time do we have?
That's right, man. We got you. We just put time out if we get to it.
You get one of these preachers on here, and you know how that goes.
Hey, no problem.
And about halfway through, they want to take an offering. Well, I grew up in Southwest Ohio, and my family is from Appalachia. And just so much that is beautiful about that culture.
Right.
I mean, the hospitality. My grandmammy, we never went to her house that she didn't run to the kitchen and start cooking. She had 12 children that lived, and she had 13 altogether. So much that's beautiful about that culture. But there's also some stuff that that had to be worked through, had to be interrogated. And, that's not an easy process.
That's right.
So I grew up in Southwest Ohio, very interested in the church, very active in the church. Grew up in a fantastic church in Middletown, Ohio. Very, very good leadership. And from a very early age, felt a call. I guess it's okay to talk about that.
Yeah.
Call to ministry.
Yeah.
I know a little bit more about Eric's religious background. His mommy was a Church of God pastor. And so same tradition. But as I matured, I went to college, I went to university, my world expanded. Let's face it. It expanded. We were fairly insular. We were a hillbilly elegy. My family was from Kentucky. Everybody I knew, I think, was from Kentucky, or their families one generation removed. They came across the river looking for jobs. I'll say it that way. Landed in Middletown, Ohio, and took that town over, if you want to say it that way. But anyway, just my world expanded. And, I talk a little bit about that in the book, how, I had to negotiate that difference. Folks from other religious traditions, folks with no religious traditions, ideas that from psychology, from the social sciences, from sociology, anthropology, that I just, these things weren't in the Bible, if you want to say it that way.
Yeah, right.
And it was a beautiful time of stretching. I enjoyed it immensely. There was some cognitive dissonance, okay?
Right.
But I enjoyed it immensely, and I met new friends and that kind of thing. And then I went on to graduate school, and I map a little bit of this. I taught for a little while at Xavier as an adjunct, and served as a pastor in a church. Watched a district that was divided largely on racial lines. The SWOA was predominantly white sisters and brothers, and the Cincinnati district was predominantly African American sisters and brothers. That didn't sit in my crawl just right. Look, I'm a dude that's trying to be healed. Okay, I'm not there yet. I'm not going to claim healing.
Right.
But I knew that there was something. There was a disconnect between the gospel of Jesus Christ and what I was seeing. I wasn't sure exactly what that looked like. Still green and growing. And so when I entered a PhD program as a pastor, I wanted to study race relations in the church. I studied at the University of Dayton, and I bumped in to Daniel Rudd, who was a Black Catholic civil rights leader.
Yep.
Jim Crow era, published his American Catholic Tribune from Cincinnati. And I'm telling you, that did a number on me, because what I was doing was reading a religious newspaper, owned and printed, published by an African American religious leader, layperson, which was a contemporary of the Gospel Trumpet, which was the Church of God newspaper. Everybody had a religious newspaper back in those days.
Right.
But what it really did was help me see society through his eyes. And so in our tradition, I mean, Tommy, I see your action there, but
yeah.
I feel like there were times that I came out of Roush Library at the University of Dayton just shaking my head, reading contextual work around the American Catholic Tribune, and reading the American Catholic Tribune, saying, I would never get over this.
Yeah.
I would never get over this. This stuff is really, really ugly stuff.
So let me ask you this, Gary. What is it about you that enabled you to be curious and to be able to hear a truth that was different than the life that you had lived, and to be open to embracing that?
I don't know if I can answer that question. I don't know if I know about, somebody was telling me yesterday about all the nooks and crannies we have inside of us.
Right.
That we don't really know. I would like to think, to answer your question, I would like to think it was a calling.
Yes. I
would like to think that I've got some work to do. When I was just a teenager, I felt like, and I know, the radio program goes to folks that are, that are of all different faith persuasions and none at all. And I appreciate and respect all that. But I kind of felt like God called me, to a ministry and to share what would be sometimes difficult truths. And, I'm very comfortable not seeing the whole picture.
Right.
I'm very comfortable, being one who said, I think I'm seeing this. Let's look at this together. Let's problematize this issue a little bit more, because there's more to it than we're seeing.
Right.
And I feel like that role where I sit as a spiritual leader in a very, I think, homogenous area in terms of race, ethnicity, is an important role to play. And again, I wrote my book, I think, for folks like me.
Right. We're gonna go to that in just a second. I'll give you a word that I think is a part of your character that makes you open to that, and that word would be humility. Tommy might even take it further and say cultural humility. But I think that as I was reading through, some of your book, that just sort of, comes out of that language that you use is this notion that I don't have all the answers. And I think that the problem today is that there are too many people that aren't willing to be humble enough to sort of, reduce the pride and ego that they carry in order to be curious enough to learn about others. Gary, your newest book is, That We May Be One. And I'll tell you, this is a powerful read. And Tommy, if you don't have a copy, I want to make sure we get you a copy as well. But
Absolutely.
Powerful read. I think there is a powerful amount of work that is necessary around this piece that God has given you. I just want to start here with the questions that you posed, because I think that these are important questions. I'd like you just to sort of questions you were asking yourself in the introduction. Am I willing to change, stretch, and grow to love? Do I fully recognize the immeasurable worth in all of God's people? I don't know if you even want to just talk about those, man, but I think that, have I really taken on, the bigot habits of heart in mind that tend to attach and then hold on stubbornly to us like, what'd you say?
Huckleberries.
Yeah,
Those people-
birds in the bush.
That's,
Yeah.
that's
I remember those.
ain't no Huckleberries in Cincinnati, man.
Right. There's some out in the woods that as soon as you go through the woods, they catch themselves.
They get all over you, man. You gotta get rid of them.
I love that. Talk about those questions that you were posing to yourself.
You know what? I feel like stretching and growing is difficult in my own journey. I feel like that at times when I went through adversity, that's when I was growing the most. But it wasn't no fun.
Right.
And I talk a little bit about cognitive dissonance. When we have these ideas clash in your head, when you have to interrogate the accumulation of all that you've learned that's problematic. Maybe this isn't the way it is. Maybe there's some things I picked up along the way that are very unhealthy, that are, that lead to division, distrust, hurt. These are the kind of things that, that I think about when I think about growth. There's a passage of scripture in the Bible, and you got a preacher on today, so bear with me, but it's a good story. Right. It's a story about Peter, and he goes to, the Jews had some very distinct views of non-Jews, people that, were outside the faith. And Peter was forced to confront those in a scene that is a very powerful scene where basically here's a disciple of Jesus, and the Catholics say the first pope, and he is like struggling with, no, I'm not going to their house because these people are less than. Right. There's no way I can do this. Right. And finally, the Spirit says, no, I said get up and go. You're going anyway. They're not unclean. And so he really had to stretch through that. He had to grow. Now, interestingly, in our faith tradition, I think we read that as, a fact that happened back in the day and allowed the non-Jews to come into the church and all that. But I believe that stretching and growth is required of every person in the faith today as well as yesterday. And so that's a continual, task before us is to bend and stretch and grow. And usually that's in the process of welcoming others into our faith tradition. That's not easy. It wasn't easy for me. It's not easy at times for me. And you guys know better than I do. There's a whole lot of junk that we, that keep us from being the kind of hospitable people we ought to be, generous people we ought to be, people that are promoting, unity. I use the term unity because I think that's a good church term. But there's a lot of other ways to present, these kind of sentiments, these kind of relational realities. And so, In terms of taking on our bigotry, a lot of times I don't think we know.
Right.
I mean, I think I honestly believe this. We don't see it. We just don't see it. And
Right.
you know what you were talking about, really, you were talking about the article that you read, and I need to get a copy of that. But this idea, I'm thinking about Divided by Faith, an important work that was written a number of years ago. Looking at white evangelical Christians and race relations kind of thing, we just don't see it because we don't have the cultural tools to see it.
Right.
A lot of times.
Right.
So I can be convincing to you and saying, I don't have any issues.
Right.
Because I just don't see any issues.
Right.
So I could be telling, maybe I could, go ahead and pass the lie detector test because I don't see it.
Yeah.
But once you begin to look at systemic issues, once you begin to see how, racism gets embedded in the system, perpetuates itself. In graduate school, I read Rauschenbusch and Walter Rauschenbusch and this idea of social sin. And this, I think it was Martin Luther King Jr. that also read extensively after Walter Rauschenbusch. But that began to open my eyes to some of this, but we just don't see it.
Right.
We don't see it.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And Gary, I see you as a bridge maker, right? Bridging the gap between, different concepts, different areas toward oneness. Can you talk a little bit about, and you may refer to this in the book, can you talk about where, with your status, with your position and your identity, when you are pastoring other white folks in the congregation,
Right.
who may not see what you are experiencing, may not have experienced it, so you're trying to move them and encourage them toward this oneness. And at the same time, there may be some African Americans or people of color who are not trusting the oneness. They've tried the faith-based effort and it's failed them. They've tried to hear others like yourself, like Eric and I, and said, that faith thing, I know you all been talking about that for 2,000 years, but no. And so they're moving away from it. So the question is, for folks who are of like identity as you, who don't believe in these social injustices,
Right.
and then those who say, I experience the social injustices all the time, and faith is not the answer. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, that's a good question. And, to be very transparent, I really struggle with this.
Yeah.
There are people within my orbit that say to me, hey, faith is a problem. That is the problem. I mean, if you see so many folks who, so wholeheartely embrace some of the bigotry that, just hides below the surface, comes out, regularly, but to me, from my experience of faith pushes me, I feel like, in the opposite direction. I feel like it really does push me toward growth and neighbor love. Now, I believe in the church, we have bought into this spiritualized or hyper spiritualized practice of faith where it's just Jesus and me, dude. We got one on.
Right.
And, I'm spending my time doing me some worship.
Right.
And this kind of thing. And I got it all. And I want to say, no.
Right.
No. Don't tell me what God's telling you. And, don't tell me every day what God's telling you when you can't hear folks that are screaming, this system is broken. You claim this ability to hear God, and you can't even hear your sister and brother telling you that things aren't right. Are you kidding me?
Right.
We don't listen well. We don't listen well.
Right.
And then, this hyper spiritualized faith, looks at concept like key doctrines like salvation. I talk a little bit about this in the book. But salvation is me and Jesus getting it straightened out. But if you look at a biblical understanding of salvation, think about the story of Nicodemus, the little dude that climbed up in the tree and Jesus came by, and dude was a tax collector. He was a despised kind of dude back in the day. He was a collaborator with the Romans. But when he met Jesus, the story goes that he came down from the tree, but before he could even come down from the tree, his heart was so changed that he said on the way down, he made a little speech. Half of everything I have, I'm giving to the poor. And if I've done anybody wrong, I'm going to pay it back 4 times. According to the law, I think it was 4 times. So the idea is salvation ripples through the community. It has ramifications for the way I deal with my neighbor, the folks that have been aggrieved, wronged, hurt, people that have mistrust. I mean, that's how we need to understand the faith. And our mantra at the church is a community loving God through people. If you can't love people, I don't even want to hear it.
Right.
And love is not just a feeling. It leads with respect, generosity, kindness, a willingness to attribute the best motives to somebody else and all those kind of things. So if you can't trust people, and we just did, so we just printed some trust, our unity gear. And I had seen recently a T-shirt that said "Trust God." I'm all about that. I'm in service every week, but we printed a T-shirt with a little ichthus fish, Christian symbol on it that said "Trust people!" ! Look, if you can't, faith is about trusting people. If you can't trust people, don't even talk to me. You can't talk to me. You know how it is.
Right.
I mean,
But I'm gonna say, Gary, that you are an ambassador of biblical proportion, because as I looked at your book and was reading it, what was oozing from every word was this sense of discouragement at the divisions that exist in the world. And this sense of humility that says that I'm not even a worthy carrier of the message.
right.
But as I look around and see so few people willing to pick that up, allow me, in my own humble way, to share some of what I've learned. And you say that you're speaking to the privileged, that you're trying to come to audiences of people like yourself and say, is there a way to tie together what we're commissioned to do through our faith in order to activate that for our fellow human beings that are different than us? And I just find that to be refreshing, encouraging, inspiring. And I think that, you don't know the whole story. You just know that you finished this installment on this journey that you're on. But I can tell you that when we tie together our understanding with our faith, that's a powerful combination. I'm going to ask you one question linked to that. As we look at the evangelical church right now today,
Right.
and I would say to you that there are problems on all sides. So I don't ever want to say that one side is more ignorant than any other side. I think we all have our blind spots. We have our blind spots. All you have to do is get to the right story, and then I'm blind. And so my question to you is, what happened? How is it that people can compartmentalize their faith beliefs with their human actions, especially around this cultural divide? Because it's something about culture, specifically race, that sends us crazy. And it feels like the narratives that we've been telling ourselves for so long, the stereotypes, overshadow any genuine interest in reconciling, truly reconciling with others, other than them coming into my thing and assimilating it to my way.
Well, I mean, look, I'm talking to the varsity with both of you guys. I've heard you present. I know you do this all the time. I'm speaking a language that I think is understandable in the faith community. And, I'm not saying that we don't have a witness, but, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this and how we translate it in the church. So, the world's going to, be crazy, and you guys are working all the time and trying to help folks see the light. But in terms of faith, let me try it this way. We suffer from our disunity. I'm going to stop again. No, we suffer from our disunity.
That's it.
We spend a lot of time talking about the Jesus prayer for unity. He's on the way out the door, John 17, and he does something curious. He gets the disciples all around. He's giving him instruction. He's headed out, man. These are important words. And then he bows his head, I'll say it that way, and prays a prayer and says, Lord, I pray that they may be one, that the world may believe, and this kind of thing. It's a prayer, Tommy Tenney says, that we have to answer. This is not like, I'm going to Amazon to ask Jesus for something. Yeah. It's a prayer that we answer. And he says, still unanswered. It's only Jesus' prayer is not answered. And so, but why would he pray that prayer? This gets to the point, that the question, because human thriving, abundant life, we don't have it when we are divided and we're gouging at one another and we mistrust one another and we name call and we label and dismiss others and we don't listen and we don't have access to the banks of knowledge that exist right beyond the border that we've fortified, or some politician or political flat platform has helped us fortify and tells us we're right and by God they're wrong.
Right.
So here it is. What if we need what others see? And I see this all the time, even like, the evangelical church misses the mark because we're not together, because we can't communicate. We can't share. Hey, look, let me show you what I see. You see salvation. You get your soul saved. Let me tell you something about justice. Let me tell you something about equity that I see. Let me tell you something about, addressing needs along the lines of class and privilege and these kind of things. Others see that. I might not see it. I need them. And so, we drove the car into the ditch, white evangelicals, because we are not connected. We don't see it. Right. Now, that doesn't make us any less culpable, but our faith is odious when we, have about a half truth that we're throwing out there, and we need each other. Is that fair?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I would say, let me throw this in at time. I would say that Christianity is caricatured as giving the Indians the Bible and taking their land.
Okay.
That's how Christianity is caricatured. So it's hard anymore today to talk about the power of a Christian faith when people only see it as transactional.
There you go.
I think it is the humility and it is the empathy and the willingness to love those in front of you in a way that I won't lead with my conversation with you about faith, but I lead with my conversation with you about love through action. And I think that that's what the Christian church doesn't understand enough, that when we get caught up in these sidebar things, then what it does is it sends a message to the world that we're no different than anybody else. If you're just arguing with me, if you're just stereotyping me and you're debating over why I'm in the position that I'm in, and you're not willing to love me or to care about me or to want to learn from me or to hear my story, then it really makes everything else you're talking about hollow, transactional, and no different than anybody else. And I think that that's what you're capturing, this urgency that they may be one has an urgency to it that says, hey, you all, you just said it. Our lives are not as fulfilled when we don't have access, full access to each other through a humility that says that I want to learn about you. I don't want you just to be a part of my thing as another pawn on my board. I want to know you. I want to learn from you.
Let me give you an illustration, if you don't mind. So I experience full. And I believe at times we experience the divine when we cross these boundaries and borders. I pastor a small rural church, and these are good folks. And I have one gentleman that comes part of the time. I write about him in the book. I told him I was going to write about him. He hasn't read the book yet, but dude is gifted. I mean, he makes these little automobiles, wood carvings. I mean, you would just like drop, your mouth would drop at his creativity. Dude is tattooed up, drives a pickup, he wears the hat, he's like that kind of dude. And, he'd be easy to throw in a bucket and dismiss. So he sits in the back of the church. One day we had the opportunity to have a guest from Rwanda who suffered immensely, lost her family, very nearly escaped. And I have a harrowing story about hiding behind the door, seeing her cousin killed. I mean, it's just like crazy, violent kind of thing. So she came to speak in our church just because she didn't have a place, and I thought it would be good for our people. And so you kind of had to lean in to hear and understand her English. She did really well, but it was tough to listen.
Right.
And I had my pastor's hat on, and I'm trying to, think, well, can everybody understand? Can everybody hear? So she gives a story, and it was very moving. So after the service, I send them to the back, and I'm up there milling around like pastors are known to do. And I look back there, and this tattooed dude has got this woman in her African dress completely embraced. Like he had just met his long lost sister or something. And I thought, that is so curious. So I went back there, and he was hammer and tong talking to her. And, I said something to him about it. I said, hey, it seems like he goes, man, God talked to me. And I thought, I didn't feel that. But and I spoke to him a couple of weeks later. He said, no, the Lord talked to me during that time. So here's this woman who's from Rwanda, for heaven's sake.
Right.
Dressed in traditional, 7,000 miles away.
That's right.
She comes to a church on happenstance, such a set of circumstances, and dude sits under my preaching for, a number of years. He never said that about me, And God spoke to him so clearly. He said, with this Rwanda woman, that's, petite and in her dress, and all this, it's like, whoa, there you go. Try that on for size. How you like them apples?
How you like them apples?
That is so powerful. Tommy.
Yeah, I enjoy that story. I enjoy that testimony.
Me too.
Testimony of how God and our Lord comes and can absolutely enter one's life and spirit, regardless of what they look like and maybe even their own experiences. And even to your point, Gary, of the assumptions that others may have about a person, God is omnipresent, and he is transformative.
Right. I like that, Tommy.
Transformative. And so I would like to lean to you and your wisdom and knowledge here as I'm listening. You're more familiar with the story of Babylon than I might be. I am. I'll just say that. Gary, are we living in the times of a spiritual Babylon, that we've fallen from the sky and we're divided and splattered and spread throughout the earth? Are we living in the contemporary times of that that real world as well as that psychological and spiritual world.
Wow. So Tom is a professional baseball player, and you just took a softball, maybe a beach ball, and you didn't throw it very hard. There's no good, just like a little. Maybe Well, the reason I say that, and Eric's laughing too, because he knows that's what we talk. That's our verbiage. We talk about a spiritual balance. We used to say in the Church of God, come out from Babylon. All these denominations are man-made and they divide the body of Christ. We have no use for them. These were the old pioneers, I should say. They would talk about seeing the church and all her beauty and that she is united in Christ and pure. And they would say, come out of all this nonsense, these divisions. You got the Baptist against the Church of Christ. You got this one against this one, and they're fighting. That's not the way the church should be. Now, obviously, in the next generation, they softened that up a little bit, as is wont for, radical movements to move toward a denomination. But, when they were more ecumenical, what I do see, Tommy, and I think that's insightful on your part, is a new Babylon, a Babylon that is, that passes maybe for a faith, using faith symbols and language, but it's divisive,
right?
And it is ugly. I don't want to disparage. This is a radio program, but I have been really disturbed, and I've made calls about it. I've called my local Christian radio station. I made 3 video clips just the other night, and I was sharing them with my wife, trying to figure out how we would leverage some of this stuff. If you turn this stuff on, it is so divisive. The vilification of one party, the wholehearted endorsement of pejorative labeling, which I think is unbiblical, by the way.
Right.
I think in Christ, there is no Jew, Gentile, slave, or free. There is no tiering.
Right.
So these labels that we throw around, you're a liberal and you're crazy and you're a conservative and you're nuts. These are illegitimate labels in the body of Christ, because there is none. The label is, you are a kingdom citizen, this kind of thing. That's all. Just one. There's no other. But we have fallen into that trap.
Yes, we have.
Now, in the book, I talk about upper room exercises, Tommy, and I know this is a long answer, and I'm sorry.
No.
You asked the good questions, but the upper room exercise, what I want folks to realize is Jesus sent these disciples to the upper room before they were to go out and welcome the world into the church, because they were all from Galilee. They all had, they all spoke the same. They all had the same accent, and I'll use my Southern accent. They all had their own biases. Grandmama told them this and Grandpapa told them this about these folk. He said, go up to the upper room and one another and pray until don't leave there. You're going to do more harm than good. Don't even leave until. And then the Spirit comes, and then they're all speaking the languages of folks all over the world. In other words, there's a stretching and a preparation for them to engage the world.
Yes.
It wasn't just boldness that they needed. It was something more. It was to begin to love the world that God loves. And, we talk about love, I sound so progressive and thin. No, learning to love somebody, man, there's so much to that. When you got married, you know how it is. You think she's nice looking and you love her. No, when she's down, when she's hurting, when she's weeping, then something approaching love kicks in, and so we learn to love, and there's a lot to it. So,
Gary, you say this, that because we hear a lot of people wishing for the old days, and you say they don't necessarily see that things have always been. If we look at things sort of the way that things have always been, it exacts an opportunity cost. You said there's a price for inequity, one measured in the layers of unity, layers of injustice, anguish, mistrust, animosity, and that's several generations deep. You said God is present in our efforts to practice unity. I think that's important for us to recognize. We do not work alone. I think that that's what Tommy and I both benefit from. We know that the work that we do is beyond what Tommy and I can do ourselves. We know that the presence of God is in that. But you then say, but neither do we sit around on our hands, blind, content, and comfortable, waiting on God to change stony hearts. I think that sums up a combination of things. People wishing for the way that things used to be, having no idea about how those things have been exacted a cost that was measured in all those things, that we're not working alone. It's important for us to see that, but we got to not sit on our hands. We've got work to do ourselves. Man, I think all of that's powerful. I think that embodies what you're trying. What do you see as the ultimate goal of this work?
Well, I mean, if I could just get to the point where we begin to have a little bit of humility. I mean, you started with this whole thing of humility. I mean, we in the church have got it bad. And I'm not pointing at somebody else. I've had to struggle through all kinds of stuff. We know everything. We know how it began in Genesis. Exactly. Yeah. How many days? Right. We know exactly how it began.
Right.
We know exactly how it's going to end and who's in and who's out. And we know everything in between. We're not in a learning posture. We're not in a learning posture. So if I could get folks to say, hey, look, here's a story. Let me share a story about my own journey that was not easy, and things along the way that I began to see. When an issue pops up and there's some injustice. I mean, I go back to Daniel Rudd, or when we talk about patriotism, that is a conflicted patriot. I hope that's okay to say.
Yeah.
My folks, they don't understand that. Right. They don't understand that Medgar Evers came home after serving his country and couldn't vote in Mississippi.
Right.
They don't get that.
Right.
I mean, and what these folks were doing was giving America an opportunity to live up to its creed. Now, Daniel Rudd talked about that over and over again. He was, okay, so I'm all about patriotism. I mean, I didn't serve, my son served, but I'm all about that. But listen, those folks that see America and what she could be, and sometimes it isn't, rather, I should say, grammatically, then you don't discount what they're saying. There's always been, I love, well, anyway, let me just say it this way. We don't understand conflicted patriotism.
Yeah.
And we should try to press in and listen and learn. Okay, well, maybe America can do better. Maybe, when we go out, we've got a mission effort going out, to our American, our Native American churches out in South Dakota. A sister was telling me about her. Hey, listen, things out there aren't good. Right. There's some ugly stuff that folks are having to deal with. That's us. How do we do a better job as Americans for that constituency? You talk about, so many generations of injustice, and, there's so much we could talk about as we get into that.
Well, you are the right ambassador because you carry the right heart. You're a learner. You approach life with great humility. You feel like an unworthy ambassador, and yet it is your humanness, your humility, that makes you, that creates that worthiness. And I can tell you that I've been inspired by the things that you've said in your book. It gives me hope. I'm inspired by the man in the back of your church. I won't be able to shake that easily, Gary, because I think that that's the power of what God brings. He needs us to be in the arena.
I agree.
But he's going to be there with us. And what God is able to do is what should give all three of us hope that God's not necessarily just dependent on us to do this ourselves. He just needs us to go. And I think that his spirit, his power, his presence is there. And then the change that in our hearts we're looking for has the potential to take place.
I find it incredibly inspiring and encouraging to know that Dr. Gary Agee and others have a focus on becoming one as humanity. And the reason why I say that, because as I'm listening, I am there's the optimism of we're going to arrive at this place that God has designed the place to be.
Mm,
We're not there yet.
right,
It is not through divisiveness.
right,
That's not what he designed.
right.
He designed oneness, atonement in alignment with him.
Right.
And so that journey, that struggle, although arduous, difficult, challenging, discouraging at times, when there's that beacon of light that he's created,
Mm,
he's created that beacon of light to say, I know it's raining, I know it's foggy, I know it's shady and hazy, but there is light and I am the light.
I love that, Tommy.
And that light is actually in us.
Mm.
We look at us. We're not looking out into the horizon of the
Right.
sun as the light. We
Mm.
look into God that's in us as the light, and we all have the same light. If we just relinquish things, and to Eric and Dr. Agee's point, be humble.
Right.
Be humble, and we can see ourselves. This is incredibly inspiring and encouraging to me.
You sure you didn't read the book? I think it's the second chapter.
Yeah.
I talk about
What you said, though, what you said here, that we might be one, you said, Gary, that basically we are being robbed of assets in our lives from those who we think we oppose or who are different than us. You're saying the life that I'm experiencing is incomplete without the beauty of others, of being connected with others. That's the way you're coming at. You're not coming at this from a you should help those folks over there and those folks over there who are less than. You're saying my life is not as fulfilled as I want it to be if I'm divided from others.
well, we've met up at up at Zion's Hill, Eric, you and I, and I hang out in a rural county, and we have God-fearing, loving people.
That's right.
But every time I go to West Middlesex, to our traditionally African American camp, I mean, it's open to everyone, but it's largely attended by our African American sisters and brothers. I tell folks, I want to get religion all over again. The insight, the power, the faith that I encounter there inspires me to be a better person and a better follower. And so, yes, the other day I was listening to Reverend Wright's. I'd found this a couple years ago, 7 decades of Black preaching. And dude's been around a while. He doesn't look that old, but he's been around a while, and is a learned man. And he's sharing what he saw with his own eyes and heard
Right.
in the African American church, different preachers. And he has a long list of women and men who could preach the wallpaper off a wall. They had different styles, different personalities. Some were seminary trained, some weren't. So as I'm listening to him, I'm seeing how he embraces them all. Doesn't matter if you got letters after your name.
Right.
There's something to be learned here, And then when he breaks into one of those, and he would start this way, and he would share it this way, and then he would build to that, maybe take a minute or two to build to a climax of a main point. I mean, the tears come to my eyes and the goosebumps come up on my back because I can feel it. I wasn't there in the 1940s in some church in Virginia, but I can feel that. There's something rich about that tradition That hasn't been my experience, but I know there's something there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to cut myself off because some political or some talk radio person is telling me these folk are this, or they're ginning this up, or they're using the, I mean, no, not going to happen. I'm not going to let that happen for me. And I'm going to encourage it not to happen for my sisters and brothers. We need each other. We suffer from our disunity. Let's get that straightened out. Let's go after the abundant life that, you know, John 10:10 talks about. We don't have it. See, here's the difference. This is like Martin Buber stuff, and it's way over my head, so I'm gonna hurt myself this morning. I haven't done yoga yet. But Martin Buber talks about experiencing the God between. We experience the God between us. That's where we experience God. What we in the evangelical church say, I got God in me and I'm set. So whatever you do doesn't matter.
Right.
That is not how I understand the faith.
Right.
Eric mentioned transactional. Martin Buber talks about an I thou experience versus an I it. The I it more transactional. The I thou is this mutually enriching encounter where God already is present. In other words, I do experience God when I come at you to listen, to learn, to share as sisters and brothers. I believe that. Now, he was a Jewish philosopher, theologian. And like I said, his work is difficult to read and harder to process. But what I do understand runs me in circles.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And so I think that's what Eric was referring to a while ago. But
Gary,
anyway.
how do people get a hold of your book, man? Talk about how they can get a hold of the book. And if they want you to come in and talk to their group, man, how might people be able to get in touch with Dr. Gary Agee?
Well, we can put up our email, I guess, on your, you can use my email. Of course, I'm on GBAG, Gary B. Agee Ministries. I'm at the Beechwood Church. You can reach me on Facebook, Gary B. Agee Ministries. But you can get it at Erdman's. Now, I thought about selling it and trying to set up something on my own page, but it's just really easy. They have the infrastructure at Erdman's to get it out. You can also purchase it through Liturgical Press. They have come together to release the book, which is a traditionally, a Catholic publisher, as I understand it. And so they've come together to publish it. I'm excited about the book. I would love to talk about it. And so, we'll make that happen for anybody that wants to do that.
Right.
And let me say this. I realize that both of you have influenced my life, and I appreciate you allowing me to talk about the book. And I appreciate the investment that you've made in me, both of you. And I hope to honor that investment by doing good work. And I appreciate you.
Right. Well, we appreciate you, Gary. Gary, you've been a blessing to the community this morning, man. You've shined a light of hope on this conversation, that because of people like you, there's hope that we can get better, man, because it's good people laying everywhere, just not realizing what's absent from their life is a little bit more joy that they would gain from being unified with others. Tommy, any last word you want to share before we put a wrap on?
My last word, I can speak for myself. I know Eric agrees that this conversation today is exactly what diversity conversations is, right? We're trying to get to some oneness, right, in the kingdom. And so thank you, Dr. Agee, Dr. Gary Agee, and our community for joining us this morning. And I hope that everyone has a blessed weekend and a prosperous week to come.
Okay. We'll see y'all next week for another installment of our diversity conversations.